Welcome to the Magdalene Voices, giving voice to those silenced for centuries through sacred conversations with beautiful, illuminating souls. I am your host and facilitator, Maria Stella. I serve radiant beings just like you, committed to awakening through love and the deep sacred work required to not only unveil the truth of who you are, what you are, and why you came, but also to express that truth and knowledge through the work that you do in this world. If you haven't already, I highly encourage you to join my sacred circle to stay connected and updated. You can do so on my website, mariaestella.com. I currently offer sacred journeys for soulful entrepreneurs and Magdalene's rising, wanting to embrace, embody, and express their divine feminine and divine masculine essences of being and doing, as well as work deeply with their shadow aspects, ultimately serving the world in its unveiling, awakening, healing, enlightenment, and ascension. In my sacred journeys, I not only facilitate, but I also catalyze the expression of your soul's divine purpose, supporting you in bringing forth that which you are here to birth. If you're curious about my work, go to mariaestella.com to find out more. And if you have ever wondered about your own personal Magdalene connection and calling, whether you are a Magdalene or not, I invite you to download the Magdalene Blueprint that I have created for you. Go to mariaestella.com/AYM to get it. Today I'm joined by Julie Parker. Hailed by Elle magazine as a self-help guru, Julie is the CEO and founder of the Beautiful You Coaching Academy, where she passionately trains and supports heart-centered people to bring their talents into the world as life coaches. She is the editor-in-chief of Inspired Coach magazine, a published author and in-demand speaker, and has inspired thousands of people on stages all over the world. Julie is the recipient of numerous leadership and women's business awards, and she appears regularly in the media. Julie is also a modern-day priestess and is committed to contributing to a world where feminine qualities of intuition, presence, nurturing, and love sit comfortably within the realms of global for-profit entrepreneurship. Julie lives in Melbourne with her husband, stepdaughter, and two much-loved adopted cats. In this sacred conversation, Julie and I ended up being led deeply into how we see Mary as a powerful beacon for social justice and structural change, not only in her time, but today as well. Here is our sacred conversation. Julie, welcome to the Magdalene Voices, and thank you for gracing us with your presence today.
Thank you so very much for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here.
You're welcome. My very first question is going to be, because the reason you're here is because of your own podcast, the Priestess Podcast. And I'm not sure how I was pulled to it, but I was pulled towards or drawn towards an episode in which you talked with Melanie Lucia about the dark feminine. And in that conversation, you shared how Mary Magdalene had been showing up for you. And that got me kind of curious. I never decide who I want to have on the Magdalene Voices. That is ultimately decided for me. And when I get a nudge, then I invite people into this sacred space. And here you are. And so I guess my first question is going to be, when did you first realize that Mary had made her way into your life? How did she, when did you first realize that she had made her way into your life?
Mary came to me through a drum journey that I was experiencing with a group of women in a really beautiful natural bush setting here in Australia. And nobody was more surprised than me when I saw her. And this journey was an invitation to connect with our higher guide for that year, because it was the first of many experiences that I was going to have with that group of women over a full year-long period.
Mm-hmm.
Intensive camping and bush and wilderness experiences. And I went into that journey with no preconceived ideas around who may come to me. Because I feel so deeply connected to the goddess, I have assumed that it may be a goddess of some kind that may come forth. And as I said, nobody was more surprised than me when before me very, very clearly appeared Mary Magdalene. And she did not tell me that her name was Mary Magdalene. I just happened to know that that was who she was. Like, as soon as I saw her, I knew that that's who she was. She didn't actually say, this is me. And I think the reason that was so surprising to me was because I had never had any interest in her before. I had never worked with her before. I was not raised a Catholic, and my Christian upbringing was pretty loose, to be frank. Like, it was not, went to church a few times as a little girl, Sunday school, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I knew really very, very little about her. And so that's how she first came to me. And it was a surprise, but one that's turned out to be so welcome and so delicious ever since.
Mm-hmm. And so did you embrace her straight away, or did you kind of have to find or wiggle your way into her?
No, I embraced her straight away. Like, her energy, the way that it came towards me was so comforting and loving and welcoming and nurturing. And that's very much Mary. Yeah. She is truly so divine and all of those things, but she's also so incredibly powerful. Yeah. And I have come to love her, I think, in two very different but complementary ways. And one of the first things that I had to do, or that I felt compelled to do actually, is when I was driving away from that experience on that weekend, was to actually come home and speak to my husband, who was raised a Catholic, and ask him, tell me what it is that you know of Mary Magdalene. Yeah. And I knew the top line stuff that the patriarchy has all painted her with. And he said, even though, of course, we now know that that is not the case, he said what we were taught when we were in school, in Catholic school, was that she was fallen, that she was a sinner, that she was a prostitute, and that Jesus saved her. Yeah. And he said, really, she was spoken about only in those terms. And the Mary that we were all supposed to concentrate and be more attuned with was Mother Mary. Mm. And I went, okay, yep, that's pretty much what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, because that is, even though, and it's so interesting that you would share that, because I think it was 1969 when they actually retracted the statement that made her fallen. So that's what, almost 50 years ago, I suppose. Is it 50 years? Yeah. Almost 50 years ago that they retracted that she's the fallen one, the prostitute. Okay, so how does she show up for you in your work or your life? How do you work with her if it's a work relationship, or how is she present for you?
Oh my goodness. I think, in all honesty, a more accurate question over the last 12 months would be, how is she not present for me? Yeah. Because she has become such a significant part of my life and my spiritual practice. And I think the way that she does show up for me, as I was mentioning before, it feels like in two very different ways, but that they're also very complementary. The first way is, I feel, in a very inner way. And I find working with her, calling in her presence, setting an altar and a space to her, working with essential oils that are very connected to her, rose, spikenard, things like that, really help me to take better care of myself. They really help me to nurture myself and find a very deep, connecting, rich, red love within me. I feel that Mary, in that way, she really helps me tap into my blood. She helps me tap into my heart and that divine embodied aspect of who I am.
Yeah.
The other way that she comes to me is more as somebody that is really challenging to me around her survival and rising above the patriarchy.
Yes.
She is a resistor. She's a warrior. She is somebody who has risen above such incredible circumstances in so many different ways, and stories that have tried to belittle her and tear her down. And she's such a champion voice for the power of women, but I think also just the power of the oppressed, full stop. Yes. You know, this is, in my interpretation and my perspective, and I know that that is different for everyone, this is, to me, the second most powerful person, I should say, and the most powerful woman within, you know, the Christian paradigm and ethos and religion. And yet she has never been seen as that. No. She has always been seen as so much less and so much more less powerful than what she truly is. No. And so she comes to me in a very challenging way, and she has really ignited within me, along with a lot of other things that have contributed to this, a very passionate stance that I have around a lot of social justice issues at the moment. And I know that a significant channeling of that comes through her, that those two faces of Mary, the inner and the outer as well.
Yes. That is so beautiful. I'm not sure she's the second. I'm not sure if she's not the first. I waver in that, because the way I know that Yeshua was the one that was the, you know, he was the outgoing one, or the one that was manifested in the world, but she was pulling the strings, and she was holding the space, and he was even, you know, putting her up on a pedestal as well. Or at least so it seems to me. I love how you mentioned the social justice part, because very often when we talk about, and the thing is, for me, I'm not even sure that I consider Mary a Christian in the way that the world perceives Christianity today, because in my world they came to you know, they came to uproot what was going on at the time. They came to install or insert a new paradigm, or a new way, and the way of love. And very often, and that's what I'm getting to, is that the very often when we talk about love, or the way of love, or kindness and compassion and so forth, it gets mistaken for inactivity and silence, and just, you know, very flowery, and very, you know, unicorns and butterflies. And to me, that is not what they did. To me, they were rebels. Yeshua was crucified for his beliefs, because he spoke out against the patriarchy, the Sanhedrin, the current system that was there at that time. So I find that very. Will you speak more about that? How in what way? Like, because I know that I've seen your posts, and I know that you're vocal, and so does she give you strength? What is it that you pull from her?
Oh, strength, inspiration.
Yeah.
A voice. You know, clearly it's my voice.
Yeah.
And when I call her to me, it's still my voice, you know, through her. But she gives me all of those things and so much more. And I just could not agree with you more. So often when we speak about spirituality in a modern day context, we really are missing a very, very significant part of, at least from my perspective, what it truly means to be a spiritual person. And of course, we all know that we are spiritual beings. All of us are. It's just how much we wish to embrace that,
Yes.
that makes it a very significant part of our life or not.
Yeah.
But you're right, there's lots of platitudes of love and light and, as you said, unicorns and butterflies, and it's a giggle, but it's actually really true. And the fact of the matter is that it's dangerous, because if that's the only thing that we are talking about within the context of being a spiritual being, we are entirely missing the fact that spirituality without social justice and connecting in with oppressed peoples and what our role is as a person ourselves in that is, well, it's nothing. From my perspective, it's nothing. It fails. It's like talking about feminism and not, if your feminism doesn't address white supremacy, then to me it's not really feminism, because it means you are entirely forgetting women of colour, trans women, and so many other people within that. And so these things are deeply connected. What are we doing if we're working on our inner world, if that's not then to become a deeper reflection of how we can do better in an outer world, then really what's it all about? Because it's not all about unicorns and butterflies.
No. And I'm smiling, I'm smiling simply because I wanna chest bump you and high five you across the world, because it gets lost. And I think, but I also think that it's part of the journey that we have to be, because I see it, for me, I see the awakening journey as an unveiling, and that it's an ongoing unveiling where we continue to have more and more veils lifted, or as we evolve. And also we for me, because parts of being spiritual, being white, being woman in this world, there's a quote unquote enough hurt to look at, and it can be difficult to look at things, and for me, part of this work is, part of all of the work that I've done is being able to hold space for that hurt, and for those emotions and those feelings that come up when I encounter things that don't seem right or sit right with me. And it's far easier to shut your eyes and turn away than it is to stand up and to look at it. And that's part of what I think that that's what she did. She continued her work even after the resurrection. She continued her work in the world, all those many, many years ago. I'm wondering, why do you think, because to me, it seems as though she's making her, like, she's flooding across the globe. Not only she, for me, I want to say that the Magdalene Voices is not just about her, it's about the whole. For me, the Magdalenes are all of those who walked with Yeshua, or walked with both her and she's the one that's been called the Magdalene, but in truth, a lot of the people that were with her and with him were Magdalenes. And so I'm wondering, why now? Like, why do you think that it is now that she seems to be showing up?
That is a really great question, and I don't know whether I certainly don't have an answer for everyone. I can only answer from my perspective, in that I think she showed up for me personally because I was at a point in time in my life where I really needed to take better care of myself personally to then be able to have more of a voice and have more of a foundation and less fragility and less a lot of things, which is something that I'm still working on within the social justice space, and to use my voice more. And so I think that's why she showed up for me. And then within the context of the wider world, I think there are a lot of people, particularly white people, that even though I can only imagine how frustrating it must be for people of colour and Native and Indigenous peoples, and thinking, well, yeah, we've been telling you about these things for decades, in fact, hundreds of years. I don't know why it is that now it just seems to be that a lot of people are just finally having their eyes opened to things in a much more significant way. I think it could be a combination of things. In truth, I think some of it might have been Donald Trump may have been a catalyst for some of this, because so many people, and, you know, I'm very happy to, you know, it's not my country, it's not this, but I'm horrified by such an overt racist and misogynist being in such a significant and powerful position in the world, potentially the most powerful position in the world. I think that's part of it. I also think there have been a lot of different things that have been happening around the world that have been so tragic in so many different ways and so heart-wrenching, and people are like, hang on a second, what is going on here? And realising these are not isolated incidents, that they are the ongoing impacts of things such as white supremacy, the patriarchy, capitalism, so much more. And I also think that so many people of colour and Native and Indigenous peoples are just really, really becoming so significantly loud and angry and extraordinary in the way that their voices are reverberating throughout the world, that to ignore them means that you're not living. Like, if you can't hear it, if you can't see it, if you can't feel it at the moment, then something's really wrong. Something is really, really wrong, because it's right in front of our faces.
And it's time to wake up. And yep. I want to say this because one of the things, so I am born and raised in Denmark, and there's so many things that come up for me. So I'm just going to, but first, the thing is, I want to invite our listeners and viewers to, rather than say, oh, I was born in a place where, you know, we didn't have Indigenous peoples, or we didn't have, you know, Native Americans or whatever. I invite you to try and look further, or to look into your history. Because for me, being born and raised in Denmark, we had Greenland, or we have Greenland. And what we did to the Indigenous peoples of Greenland is very much like what happened to the Indigenous peoples in Australia and to the Native Americans of America. And I'm pretty sure that most countries, civilized countries in the world, have a history of oppression or abuse in some form or another. So it's not about looking towards the other. I know, because I'm mentioning this because this has been a journey for me. It was easy to say, oh, the Native Americans, and oh, you know, I'm not American, so I don't, that's not on me. I'm not Australian, so it's not on me. And it's very easy to go out and judge. But then I realized, wait on, we had, first of all, we had slaves during, because we had some of the West Indian islands, so we had slaves. We were part of that trade for a while. We have Greenland, and so this is just an invitation for those who want to cast blame on others or to judge on others, is to go back and look at your nation's history, because I'm pretty sure that and it's not to say your fault or guilt, but it's about, like you say, social justice and what can I do and how can I be part of the solution, basically.
Yes.
And then the second thing is, for me, what you mentioned about the patriarchy and my belief and the messages that I'm getting is that is what Jesus or Yeshua and Mary Magdalene came here for. They came here to be, I see them as like a rod that's like they're driving in to open us up in order to release the grip of the patriarchy. What I'm very, I wouldn't say frustrated, but irritated about is the way that they've been made these poster childs for white supremacy and Christianity. And then, it's all, loving God. But what is loving God if it's not for everyone? It's just, it doesn't resonate. It's never resonated. I was not born and raised in any, I kind of like you, and I call it the Lala Christian, because it's like, it's Lala, it's like for Christmas and for Easter perhaps and so forth.
Okay.
I call it the Lala because it was not like, it wasn't really, but it's but the way they've been made, and I think that's why I have this show and this podcast, is to try and bring another view on these two people and the people that surrounded them, because I believe that they came here to install or insert a different paradigm and to basically start dismantling the patriarchy. That's how I see it, and but they were then, their message were then distorted and being put into a religion where it had, for me, no place. I'm not on a crusade against religion. I want to open up space. So, what was my question? So so in your work in your life, so I'm assuming that, because it sounds to me like there's been a shift then, because I'm going to, in the blog post that I do with this podcast, I'm going to include a link to, if it's still up, a link to a post you did about, what was it? The 26th of January, which is the, do you call it Australia Day, or what do you call it?
Yes, that's right. It's known here as Australia Day. It's our national holiday. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I can imagine there's been a shift, and the word that keeps coming up for me also is courage. I don't know how courage fits in, because it sounds to me like, because I know that you must have had a big platform of a certain kind of people, and you must have experienced, or I don't know, did you experience some kind of a backlash or a drop, or like there's been a shift for you, no? Or am I?
Well, it's really interesting, that question that you ask, because I chose to post that on my personal Facebook account. I didn't choose to post it on my business Facebook page, even though I would have been more than happy to do it. The reason that I did it on my personal Facebook page was because I really wanted to send a very clear message to my family and my friends and people who are friends with me on Facebook, that I no longer agreed with the celebrating of Australia Day on January the 26th, which is the day that it is traditionally celebrated and was again this year, for all the different reasons that I mentioned there, which people can read, but that essentially it is a day of horror and displacement and colonialism for our Indigenous peoples, and that I was no longer going to be a part, even though I love this country and I love Australia and I love being Australian, I was no longer going to celebrate on a day that our Indigenous Australians and the first Australians have now mentioned again and again and again for decades is a day of mourning and hurt for them. I'm not going to be part of that anymore. And the reason I did it on my personal page was because I really, really wanted people who were very close to me to know this is where I stand about this.
Yes.
You know, maybe many, many years ago, I might have had you over to my house for an Australia Day barbecue.
Yeah.
Maybe we went on a picnic together. Maybe we had a beer together at the beach somewhere.
Yeah.
Or I'm not doing that anymore on this day.
No.
And this is why. And you know what? I was really expecting there to be a backlash of at least some kind. Some kind. I thought that at least one person or maybe a couple of people might have challenged me about it in some way, because there certainly are challenges to that perspective, a lot of them. And you know what? There was not one. And I'm putting this down to one of two things, both of which I kind of see in a way are positive. The first is that a lot of people actually now agree with me, and there was a lot of people chime in, there was a lot of people share the post, and that was really great, and really I was so happy and pleased about that. And there are more and more Australians that believe that too. But that also those that disagreed, I think they read what I wrote and went, yeah, I ain't taking that up to her because I'm not going to win here. Not that this is anything about winning, but I think the message was pretty clear that if you come at me about this,
Yes.
I'm going to come back at you. Like, I will not be silent about this anymore. And so if you want to challenge me on it, go for it, but get ready for a fight, because I'm not going to let anybody post anything on here that is racist or belittling in any way, excuse me, and not expect me to not defend my position and why it is that I believe that. And, you know, again, Mary, she was so profound in her beliefs, so strong, so courageous. And, even thinking about the crucifixion, who was there front and center?
Yes.
When so many others
yes.
said, I can't see this, I can't witness this, I can't watch this.
Yes.
She was right there at the front, just witnessing this. I could only imagine would just be a horrifying experience to witness somebody that you loved so very, very deeply be in that amount of pain.
Yes.
But knowing that she just had to be there. And there were others that, well, they reneged.
Yes.
All the blokes, all the men. No, can't do it.
No.
But Mary was like, I have to be there. I can't allow him to be alone and go through this experience on his own. And so I will turn up. I will be there.
Yes.
And she was.
Yes, she was indeed. And she was there. That's one of the things that a lot of people seem to miss, because according to Jewish law at the time, if you look at that, she could not have been there, or she could not have been the first to see him after the 3 days, had she not been his wife. So
correct.
Yes. So it's so interesting how that has happened. And when you mentioned the Australia post, I had tears in my eyes, because it's so beautiful is the word that comes up, but not in the I don't mean that in the light fluffy way. I mean it like in the strong, powerful way that this is like, it's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, like, this is where I stand, and it's showing up powerfully, truthfully, fully in your own in your presence, and saying, I will not, I will stand for this. And again, that's one of the things, because I'm, my core is love. I stand for love, but love does not mean being a doormat. It's standing for what is right, and standing for truth. And if we look at all of the people who've worked with social justice over the year, all of them will say, they will all talk about love, and in kindness and in compassion and so forth. But they will also say, hell no. Like, no, it's not No, it's double, because love is gentle and kind, and it's soft, but it's also the strongest, for me, the strongest power in saying, in standing up for what you believe in.
Mm. I think that true love is very boundaried.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's very strong, and it's very, of course, it is gentle and tender, but it's also very strong and very boundaried. And, you
Yes.
say that it's like drawing a line in the sand. That, in many ways, that's exactly what it was. It was
Yeah.
just a very, very strong, energetic message that I wanted to send to the world, just in case you might be wondering
Yes.
where I might stand on this issue that is now every single year becoming a very, very hot and divided topic. This
Yes.
is where I stand.
Yes.
And I want the date changed, and I support people who want the date changed, and I will not celebrate our country on this day because of the meaning behind it. And I don't necessarily think, I think it's interesting when we talk about the word courage. I don't think that was courageous of me. It was just what needed to be done, like it was just something that I needed to say. And
Yes.
I think in so many ways that would not be dissimilar, not that I'm sort of, I hope it doesn't come across as I'm likening myself to Mary Magdalene, but I think in many ways that would be exactly the way that Mary would think about things. If people were to say to her, "Oh, you were so courageous to do this, and so courageous to be at the," and she'd be just like, it had to be done.
Yes.
It was what
Yeah.
it was what I was called to do. It was what was meant to happen.
And I'm wondering when this will begin to happen with Thanksgiving in the U.S. Because I know that it has started, but it's basically, although they celebrate their nation's day on the 4th of July, and to my knowledge, there's no, there may be, I don't know, in the history, there may be a connection to some kind of a killing or a slaughter, but that's basically what they do for Thanksgiving, is that they, a lot of natives or Native Americans have come forth and saying, when you celebrate Thanksgiving, it's basically you're celebrating the slaughter of Native Americans, and so I'm wondering when that will kind of start to have a ripple effect. And I completely agree with what you said about Donald Trump being a catalyst. I see him as a catalyst, because we can't heal what's hidden in shadows. We have to quote unquote shine a light upon it. And if nothing else, that is what he's doing. He is like, the rug is being pulled off. He's showing everyone everything, all of the racist and the racist things and the oppression, everything is being brought forth. I can't remember if I mentioned this before on the show, but when I woke up the day after, and realized that he'd been elected, I posted on my Facebook. I had a post put up on Facebook, where because I was speechless, and one of the people in my network said, "Oh, this is a great thing. He will bring forth so much change and so forth." And from a spiritual perspective, I understood and understand that. But from a human perspective, I understand that I am white, I am woman, I was born and raised in a democracy. I am about as privileged as they come, free access to healthcare, free access to education. It is not me who has to go through the pain and the hurt. I do because I choose to stand for what is right as well. But that was one of the things where I saw those spiritual white women, where it's all unicorns and butterflies, and it's about realizing that I'm not, I can walk away today or tomorrow or yesterday if I want to. Like you said, Black people can't, transgender people can't, people with a different sexuality than mine can't. And so that's where I see Mary and Yeshua, because it's obvious throughout the Bible and the things that I've learned is that they stood for what was right. They didn't care where you came from, whether you were, gay or whatever. It was about love, but again, not the wishy-washy love, but the one that stands for truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there is so many things happening within the US around topics of cultural appropriation and social justice and so many things. Of course there is. And I can't speak to things such as Thanksgiving and Columbus Day and Native, title rights and so many things like that. But, there are more and more voices that are happening, and that, of course, is exactly what should be happening in so many different ways. And it makes the platitudes of people who are attempting to completely spiritually bypass and say things like, oh, we're all the same, and there's just one human race, and I don't see color, and we just should focus on the light. And even just today I saw somebody looked at a book trailer, and somebody was just talking about the fact that we all just need to be focusing on being high vibe, and somehow or another that will mean that I don't know, somehow I think she really believed that would mean that the world would sort itself. And it's like that is, not only is that just ridiculous and wrong, it's actually really dangerous, because it doesn't address structural inequalities at all.
No.
And as you were saying, Mary and Jesus they got their hands dirty. They were like really out there, like actually doing the work, obviously in a very different, very, very different way to what the work means now. But we're actively, doing things. They were in action. They weren't just talking about things or worrying about what people would think about them and all of those things. It's and that's where that stuff is. Well, it's really dangerous. And truth be told, it kills people, because it makes people think that, oh, okay, well, I'll just focus on me.
Yes.
And everything will sort itself. Well, that's not going to happen.
No.
You actually have to get involved, and you have to speak up, and you have to do what is consciously right and addresses inequalities in a major and significant way. Otherwise, the fact of the matter is that you're part of the problem.
Yes.
I mean, we're all part of the problem, especially as me, a white, privileged, cisgendered, able-bodied woman. I'm part of the problem, but you're even a bigger part of the problem if you just think that, focusing on that is going to be what cuts it, because it won't.
And like you said, it's dangerous. And I know, like for me, because all of those things that you mentioned before, we're all one, we're just one human race, and I don't see color and yada, yada. Those are things that I've said in the past. Those are things that I have had to have a very deep look at, and I've had to apologize to my friends of color. I've gone back and I've apologized and said, I am sorry. Can you please forgive me for this? But we have to be willing. That's what I've learned. And it's not, things I sit at the fire of a lot of people and try to listen and learn, because that's the only way I can look at it. I can't dissolve whatever, because it's about understanding that patriarchy and white supremacy is so ingrained in white people that we cannot see it. I cannot see it. I have to be willing, and I have to be willing to see it. And it's not comfortable. It's like it is so uncomfortable. I read things and I see things and I'm like, ugh! and then I sit myself down and I say, okay, like really read this, really see this, really learn from this, because it's very uncomfortable once you realize the position of power and privilege that you've been in, and I just take it for granted. It's not we could go on for hours, and I love how, because I didn't know where we're going to go in this conversation.
No, I didn't know we'd go in this direction either. But that's what's happened.
Yes.
That's scary, that's the Magdalene voices.
It is, because it truly is, because that's, again, about showing both Mary, but also all of the Magdalenes and Yeshua in a different light that they've been given so far in this world.
Yeah.
And I love how that was the way that we were brought together. And because we didn't I want to say that I had a few questions that I to begin with, but we didn't plan on going in this at all. We were kind of
not at all. No.
Is there anything, as we're about to end, is there anything that you want to share with us, or are we complete?
No, I feel really complete. I didn't know where this conversation was going to go either. And I think that is one of the things that makes Mary such a powerful and significant guide to work with. She really is, as I mentioned before, for me, somebody that is so willing to go deep, deep, deep within, including deep within the shadow, because self-care and nurturing is not just about bubble baths and nail polish and that sort of thing, or having an afternoon nap. It's actually about things that are much deeper than that. And also that she was such a strong and powerful voice, and that she's a survivor, and that she is a resistor, such a strong resistor of the patriarchy. And that, she obviously, that's where she wanted this conversation to go today. So I'm just really happy to have had the opportunity to chat with you. It's been beautiful.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here, Julie. I realize now that I've only done about, I have some that I haven't published yet, but I realize now that it's kind of like a grid where with every conversation that I have, it's like we're pinning down a grid, we're creating a grid, and you being the first that I've interviewed from that side of the world, it's now there's a line that's drawn to that, and we're connected. So it's connecting the world, which is so beautiful. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me, and I want to thank you, even though you may not see it as courageous, and I want to thank you for what I see as being courageous and inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That is what we have for you in today's episode of the Magdalene Voices. I hope it served you well. If you are listening to this via podcast, know that you can go to my website, mariaestela.com. That's MariaEstela.com for all of the deeds and the details. Finally, I hope you will take a moment to either leave us a comment or review and share it with your friends on social media. God bless.